What is up, guys? This is SpaceKryptonite, here to bring you the history of a bot that has dominated the overtiering era along with the satellites. This type of bot was a one-shot killing machine and was very tiny. Ladies and gents, we have been targeted by the Flappy, also known as the Dart. So why was this bot one of the most deadliest, and what was its purpose? Before we get into this video, I want to help clear some confusion for new players. This bot lived in a time of tiers, where bot designs range from tier 1 through 10, with 10 being the highest. This determined how strong and tanky your bot was by placing your robot into a certain tier, heavily relying on the parts you used. Now that you are ready, let's get started. The Flappy has had the history of being obnoxiously OP, and was known as an overtiering monster, which meant it faced enemies in the same tier, but it would wield a high tier weapon. This in turn was sacrificing CPU, health, and size for outrageous damage. The Flappy was vast, maneuverable, difficult to target, and was able to carry 1 to 2 plasma launchers. It was able to overtier its weapons by +3 and could enter matches of tier 3 through 10, since rudders were only available in tier 4 at the time. Because the Dart was very fragile, awareness was key for the player only to take shots when the plasma was fully charged. With this bot carrying an overtiered weapon, it could easily destroy its enemies with one shot, even if the blocks around the pilot seat were barely exposed. The Flappy had several nicknames, such as the Dart, the Mosquito, the Flappy Bird, typical overtiered flyer, I hate this, ugh. You get the picture. This bot was hated by many since it was breaking the standards of being creative and was scooped down to an unfair bot that would wreck low-level players, aka seal clubbing. The Flappy was a fine and terrifying beast, but its origin was a tricky one. The first of its kind was the Gnat, created by Lindsys, which was publicly viewed on June 12, 2014. The design of this bot had the building foundations of the Flappy, yet fairly large compared to the Flappy. It utilized 2 T4 plasmas and 1 T2 plasma along with 5 rudders, but it was able to face tier 2 bots? This bot was annoying to fight, but was a decent size, so enemies were able to take it down if they were aware of its presence. Like many designs, the build evolved as other players built this bot and created their own versions. Fun fact, Lindsys named this bot Gnat because it is an annoying bug. The Gnat grew in popularity, but didn't explode ever more than the creation of this bot. This was known as the Flappy, created by Zombie, which was publicly viewed on August 13th, 2014. The design was simplified, utilizing 3 rudders and 1 overtiered plasma launcher. This design came in all sorts of flavors, styles, and utility. What makes this different from the Gnat was its peak performance when it comes to maneuvering. It is capable of precision turns and only utilizes 130 CPU at tier 3 through 270 CPU in tier 10. The Flappy was superior and its design was OP. However, small builds like this were often confused with different names, and a new name came about during its evolution. This was the birth of the Dart, aka the Plasma Dart. Players did differentiate them and often mixed the two names together. The Dart was a creative version of the Flappy in exchange for CPU, while the Flappy was just strictly about keeping it simple. The Dart franchise did evolve and many builds were created. Throughout its legacy, players would talk about the Flappies and the Darts taking over Robocraft and was in fact destroying the gameplay experience. I kid you not. This form of overtiering build was OP. It was a seal clubbing successor and caught flame throughout Robocraft forums, Reddit, and even Robocraft Garage. This was a breaking point in which the Flappy and the Dart was near its end. March 19th, 2015 came about the dawn of the Megabots hotfix number 3. If this date sounds familiar to you, it's because it's the same update that patched the Uber warp drive. The adjustments done to Robocraft's physics made the Flappy and Dart flying capabilities obsolete. Even with adjustments to its size and thrusters positioning, the build was not maneuvering like how it would normally. In the end, this build was a dangerous build that lived a fire-loving legacy and will be remembered as a bot that made its dent in the old era of Robocraft.